You pull out your phone, tap a few buttons, and hundreds of dollars vanish. You do not see them leave. You do not feel them go. They were never physically in your hand. And yet you know, with absolute certainty, that something real just happened. But did it? That question sounds like a riddle. It sounds like philosophy for people who have too much time. But the more you pull on that thread, the more the entire fabric of civilization starts to unravel in the most fascinating way possible. Because money, the thing you spend your life chasing, worrying about, earning, losing, borrowing, and saving, is not what you think it is. It never was. And the story of how we all agreed to pretend otherwise is the strangest, most human story ever told. Let us go back. Way back. Not to ancient Rome or Renaissance Italy. Go back to a village. One village, somewhere in the ancient world. The people there trade. A farmer grows grain. A weaver makes cloth. A hunter brings meat. For a while, they swap directly. You give me grain, I give you cloth. Clean. Simple. But then something breaks down. The farmer does not always need cloth right now. The weaver does not always have extra cloth to spare. The hunter only has fresh meat for about 3 days, before it becomes a problem nobody wants. Direct exchange, what economists call barter, turns out to be incredibly fragile. It requires what researcher Caroline Humphrey described, after decades of anthropological fieldwork, as a double coincidence of wants. You need what I have. I need what you have. At the same time. That almost never happens. So people got creative. In some places they used cattle. In others, shells. In ancient Mesopotamia, they used barley. In parts of the Pacific, they used massive stone discs, some of them too heavy to move. And here is where the story gets strange. Here is where your brain starts to short-circuit if you pay close attention. Those stone discs on the island of Yap, described in extraordinary detail by economist Milton Friedman in his essay on the monetary history of the island, were so enormous that people simply stopped moving them. A family would own a disc that sat at the bottom of a lagoon. It had fallen off a raft during transport hundreds of years earlier. Everyone in the village knew it was there. No one could see it. No one could touch it. But it still counted. It still represented real wealth. The disc did not need to exist physically in your possession to function as money. Read that again. Ownership of something invisible, untouchable, agreed upon only in the collective memory of a community, functioned as currency. Does that sound familiar? It should. Because that is a description of your bank account right now. Anthropologist David Graeber spent most of his life researching the origins of debt and money. His book, published in 2011, dismantled one of the most cherished myths in economics. He found no historical evidence that barter societies ever actually existed at scale. The story economists tell, that humans first traded directly, then invented money as a more efficient medium, appears to be largely a theoretical fiction. What came before money, Graeber found, was credit, debt, obligation, trust. People kept mental ledgers. You owed your neighbor. Your neighbor owed someone else. Whole networks of mutual obligation formed before anyone stamped a coin. Money did not solve a barter problem. Money formalized a trust problem. And that realization changes everything. Because now you have to ask, what exactly is money formalizing today? What is the trust, and who is holding it? When the first coins appeared, roughly around 600 BC in the kingdom of Lydia, what made them valuable was not the metal. Gold and silver had value because people agreed they did. Because they were rare and difficult to fake, and kings stamped their face on them as a signal that the state stood behind the claim. The coin said, "This is worth something because we say it is, and we have swords, so you probably agree with us." Economist Neil Ferguson, in his sweeping history of finance, calls this the first great trick of money. The state convinced you that a piece of metal was worth a loaf of bread. Not because of the metal. Because of the institution behind the metal. The institution doing the convincing. For centuries, that trick held. Gold felt real. You could hold it. Weigh it. Bite it. It had a heft, an aliveness. It tricked your senses into believing in its value in a way that felt almost physical. But then banks discovered something extraordinary. They discovered that most of the gold in their vaults just sat there. People deposited gold with goldsmiths for safekeeping and received paper receipts in return. And those paper receipts started to circulate. Merchants began trading the receipts instead of going back to collect the gold. The gold stayed in the vault. The receipts became money. And here is the part that changed everything. The goldsmiths noticed that on any given day, only a small fraction of depositors came to collect their gold. Maybe 1 in 10. Sometimes fewer. So they started issuing more receipts than they had gold to back. Loans against gold that did not exist. Money created from nothing. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the documented origin of modern banking. Fractional reserve banking, the system still used by every major bank on earth today, means that your bank does not hold your money. It creates new money when it lends. Every time a bank approves a mortgage, it does not move existing money from one pile to another. It types a number into a computer, and that number becomes real. The Bank of England published a paper in 2014 that said exactly this, in plain language, to the apparent surprise of most people who read it. The money in your account exists because a bank decided it did. This is not a metaphor. It is the operating system. And if that makes you feel slightly dizzy, stay with that feeling. Because it only gets stranger from here. In 1971, Richard Nixon made a phone call, held a press conference, and dissolved a 50-year-old promise. The United States would no longer exchange dollars for gold at a fixed rate. The gold standard was over. Every major currency on earth, within a few years, became what economists call fiat money. Fiat, from the Latin, let it be done. Money by decree. Money because the government says so. Your dollar is backed by nothing physical. Nothing you can hold, weigh, or bite. It is backed by confidence. By the belief that other people will accept it. By the military and institutional power of the United States government. By habit. This is the system that runs every economy on earth. And yet, somehow, it works. Mostly. Psychologist Paul Slovic has spent decades studying how human beings perceive risk and value. What he found is that humans are not rational calculators. We are confidence machines. We assign value based on emotion, context, social cues, and narrative. We buy stocks because we believe other people will buy them. We accept paper currency because we believe our neighbor will accept it too. We store wealth and assets that are only valuable because everyone has agreed to treat them as valuable. The price of gold today is not set by gold's usefulness. Gold is largely useless. You cannot eat it, burn it for warmth, or build a shelter from it. Its price is set by the story we collectively tell about gold, and our trust that future people will continue believing in that story. Every financial crisis in history is a crisis of this trust. The Great Depression was not a shortage of food or labor or resources. The factories were intact. The farmland still existed. People still had skills and time and desire to work. The Depression was a collapse of the shared fiction. A moment when enough people stopped believing at the same time, and the whole system seized. Historian Adam Tooze, in his account of the 2008 financial crisis, describes the same mechanism playing out in real time. What froze global markets in September of that year was not a physical shortage of anything. It was the sudden evaporation of trust between banks. Banks that lent to each other every single morning, smoothly, automatically, as they had for decades, suddenly stopped. Because they looked at each other and wondered, for the first time in a long time, whether the other side was actually good for it. The entire global financial system nearly stopped because people stopped believing. Does that terrify you? It probably should. But hold on. Because here is the part nobody talks about when they explain this. The fact that money is a shared fiction does not make it worthless. It does not mean money is fake in any meaningful sense. The shared fiction is, in many ways, the most powerful force in human civilization. Language is a shared fiction. Laws are shared fictions. Nations are shared fictions. Borders exist because we all agree to treat them as real. Corporations are legal fictions. Marriage is a social contract with legal teeth. The entire framework through which modern humans coordinate, cooperate, and build anything larger than a village is made of agreed-upon stories. The philosopher Yuval Noah Harari calls this ability to create and share fictional stories the defining feature of the human species. Other animals can cooperate in groups. But only humans can cooperate in groups of millions, because only humans can believe in things that exist purely as concepts. Money is one of those concepts. And it is extraordinarily good at its job. Think about what money actually does. It solves the timing problem of barter. It lets a doctor in one city be compensated by a patient whose grain will not be harvested for 6 months. It stores value across time, allowing people to save the result of today's labor and spend it years later. It communicates information. The price of a good tells you, in a single number, the collective assessment of its scarcity and desire, aggregated from millions of individual decisions you could never track manually. Money does all of this without any central controller, without anyone understanding the full system. It emerges from human behavior and feeds back into it, shaping what gets made, who gets to eat, which ideas become real, and which ones die on a napkin. Money is a distributed intelligence. A vast, invisible network of human cooperation encoded in numbers. And yet, the same features that make money powerful also make it fragile. And the same features that make it work for some make it punishing for others. When central banks decide to create money, and they have created enormous amounts of it in the past 20 years, the effects are not distributed evenly. The first people to receive new money get to spend it before prices adjust upward. The last people to feel it, the ones at the edges of the economy, find that prices have already risen by the time the money reaches them. Economists call this the Cantillon effect, after the Irish-French economist Richard Cantillon, who described it 3 centuries ago. The closeness of your position to the money creation process determines how much of its benefit you absorb, which is a polite way of saying that inflation is not neutral. It does not hurt everyone equally. It tends to erode the savings of people who have saved, while benefiting people who borrowed. And here is the thing that should really make you think. You probably do not have much say in any of this. The system you were born into, the one that determines how much your time is worth, whether your savings hold their value, whether you can afford to borrow or are crushed by borrowing, was not designed in any deliberate sense. It accumulated. It grew like a city grows, with no master plan, each addition built on the assumptions of the last, until the total structure is so complex that no single person understands it fully, including the people who run it. Alan Greenspan served as chair of the Federal Reserve for 18 years. He famously admitted, after the 2008 crisis, that he had found a flaw in his model of how the economy works. Not a small flaw. A fundamental one. The man who had spent nearly 2 decades guiding the most powerful financial institution in the world confessed that the reality had not matched the theory. Not because he was incompetent. Because the system is genuinely, structurally, beyond any one mind. And you navigate it every day. You check prices. You calculate worth. You decide whether a purchase is justified. You worry about rent and groceries and retirement in a currency that is itself a kind of agreed-upon hallucination, managed by institutions whose inner workings even their own governors do not fully understand, built on a history of promises that were made and broken and remade so many times that the original premise of the whole thing has been lost for generations. You do this the way fish swim in water. Automatically. Without thinking about the water. So here is the real question. Not whether money is real. It clearly functions as real. The question is what you believe you are actually accumulating when you accumulate money. Because if what you are accumulating is trust, then what preserves it is not the number in your account. It is the health of the institutions behind it. The stability of the society around it. The continued willingness of other people to accept it. Your financial security, at its deepest level, is a bet on human cooperation. It is a bet that the story holds. It is the same bet your ancestors made when they handed a stranger a coin with a king's face on it. The same bet the villagers made when they agreed that a stone at the bottom of a lagoon was worth something. The same bet you make every time you tap your phone and watch numbers move between invisible accounts. And somehow, most of the time, the bet pays off. Not because money is real in the way water, or stone, or sunlight is real, but because enough people believe in the same story at the same time, and that collective belief turns out to be one of the most consequential forces in the world. You pulled out your phone earlier. You tapped a few buttons. Hundreds of dollars disappeared. You felt it happen even though you saw nothing move. That feeling is not an illusion. That feeling is money working exactly as designed.